Good afternoon, everybody at ISTE. We are coming to you not so live, but we are happy to see you nonetheless. We miss being live and in person this year, and we hope you are all safe and you are all healthy. And in today's session, you have two presenters, one being myself and one being Siobhan Smith, who will introduce herself in a moment. But I'm Zia Hassan, and I come from Washington, D.C., where I have been in various roles in education over the last few years. I was a K-12 teacher. I taught third, fourth, and fifth grade. Somewhere in there, I got my master's in teaching. I now train teachers in technology as one of my many jobs. I do many, many different things. And I'm also an adjunct professor. And because of the pandemic, I've had to switch entirely to teaching online, as many of us have. Most of us have, I would imagine, and have made great use of my skills with Microsoft Teams as a result of having to shift. So it's been interesting to think of how to use these tools from the perspective of an educator rather than a trainer. There were a lot of things that I had not considered in my trainings that really came into the forefront when I started teaching with these tools. And I'll be talking a little bit about that today. But before I start with that, I'd like to introduce Siobhan Smith, your co-presenter.
Hi. Definitely all of the greetings and salutations that Zia led with. I am also a Microsoft and Education Learning Consultant based out of Nashville, Tennessee, by way of Detroit, Michigan. And I come to you as just a lifelong educator, not always by choice, but also not by chance. I am a third generation educator. Grandmother was a teacher, mother was a principal and teacher, which means when it was time for me to pick a career, I chose anything but education, but realized what my true passion and calling was and came back into the classroom.
So we're here today to talk about a really important topic, especially in the last year, and that is the topic of SEL, or social emotional learning. And so we'll get started today talking about some features of Microsoft Teams that I think lend themselves quite well to the topic of SEL. When we look at Microsoft Teams, there are so many features. If you don't know Microsoft Teams, I recommend checking out. I'm sure there's another session at ISTE that talks about the basics of Microsoft Teams. But in a nutshell, it's a hub that brings together all the different tools that you might use inside your classroom. Anything from discussion boards to one-on-one chat to editing files, creating group papers, using something like a OneNote class notebook, which we're going to talk about, and a whole bunch of other third-party applications can be integrated into Teams. But a couple of features that are very integral to the experience of Teams that I wanted to talk about first is when you create a new conversation in any of the post tabs, which exist in any of these channels, there's a place to type in a new message. And oftentimes, if we're trying to check in with students and actually see how they're feeling about things, we might type something like, "How's everyone feeling?" And what this will do, at least in my experience, is it will cause students to hit the reply button and type this, "I'm fine." You ever ask that to a student, how you're doing today, and they say, "I'm fine," and you know deep inside that they're not actually necessarily fine. They might be anxious, they might be tense, they might be sleepy, they might be out of energy for some reason. There's a whole range of emotions that students feel, but we are conditioned when we're asked, "How are you feeling?" to just say that we're fine. But of course, as educators, we really want to get to the heart of how students are feeling. We will really want to understand where they are in this moment so that we can figure out what type of instruction is appropriate for the class. So a couple ways to do this. The first is that in Teams, we have these little buttons at the bottom of every reply and every new conversation that we create. And one of those buttons is the emoji button, which are these little yellow faces that you may have experienced before on your phone. They're not all yellow, I suppose, but I think of them as little yellow faces. We also have, in that same toolbar, animated GIFs. And then finally, we have something called stickers. And stickers are like Microsoft's own version of emojis. They're like bigger emojis. And what's nice about Microsoft stickers is that you can actually, at your institution, customize these to meet the particular branding or the particular messaging that your institution is going for. So those three things exist in any reply that you write. And if you were to pose this same question, "How is everyone feeling?" and instead of having them reply with text, you tell them to reply with an emoji, a GIF, or a sticker, you might find students doing things like this and posting this I love this one, the Snow White emoji of just downing coffee directly out of the thermos here. But if you've ever communicated with somebody over your phone or other sort of chat communications, and you use these animated GIFs, you know that they can convey sentiment in a way that text can't sometimes. And I have found a lot more honest responses when I've asked students to express visually using these emojis, GIFs, and stickers. And of course, many of the students that we're teaching are in Gen Z, and Gen Z are very much, one of their values is this visual way of expressing themselves. Another feature of Teams that is core to Teams, it's maybe even one that you've used before if you've used Teams, is the chat button. But the reason why I bring it up is because when we have chat conversations with students, we can actually connect with them one-on-one outside of a team. This is a private one-on-one conversation that I'm having with the student. Now, I could create a conversation that has more than one student. I could also create a conversation where there are more than one student and then the option to actually leave the conversation. So you could actually create a 3-person conversation where you connect 2 students together to talk about something, whereas they may have not connected otherwise, and then you can leave that conversation so they can continue their work. It's a great way of connecting students that may have otherwise not have been connected. So the next thing I want to talk about is Class Notebook. If you don't know Class Notebook, it is a OneNote notebook, which is a Microsoft application that allows you to create a digital notebook with different sections and then different pages for those sections so that students can work on them. And a Class Notebook allows you to have a collaboration space, which is an area where students and teachers can both read and write on the content to collaborate. You can also have a content library where students can see any of the templates or any work that they need to view but not directly edit. They can make copies of that work. And then finally, there's a section for each student. And that section is something that only the students can see themselves. So student 3 can only see student 3's section. They can't see other students' sections. But the teacher can see all the student sections and they can leave feedback on work. And now Siobhan is going to tell you a creative way to use this for social emotional learning.
So thanks, Zia, for that perfect explanation of Class Notebook. And one thing we're going to do is we're going to make it even easier for you as a teacher to find Class Notebook and make it easier for the students. It definitely lives as a standalone via OneNote, meaning you can access it from the web, from the desktop. You can even put it on your mobile device and have access to it there as well. But if you're using Teams, you have the ability to use Class Notebook in Teams. Again, we want to think of Teams as that hub, making things really easy for all of our students to locate and to find. A couple of things to build on what Zia was talking about as far as communication and how students feel about sharing. Sometimes having to pull that answer out of them just a little bit more because we know that yes, no, and okay tend to be fallback responses. We can create safe spaces that are a little bit more private for a student while also allowing some public spaces. In this team, we'll jump straight into our class notebook. I'm looking at it right now from the teacher side, and I'll definitely show it from the student side so we can see why it's important and what makes the difference here. When I'm looking at this, and actually this is the student side, I can see that Siobhan, she's one of my best students, has a couple of places that she can input information. I've set her notebook up for her, all things that you do as part of the class notebook process. We do have some class notebook sessions taking place during ISTE this year, so if you have the opportunity, please make sure you go over, join one of those, and learn about it. I always like to say that class notebook is that secret weapon that you can keep in your pocket. It's the Swiss Army knife of Office 365 for education and in the classroom. It does whatever it is that you need it to do. So looking at this from this student space, we can see that collaboration space that Zia was talking about. This is that space where students can contribute, teachers can contribute, and it's open for everyone. We went ahead and dropped the social emotional learning section in here. And this is just a space of encouragement. We want our students to be able to find something, maybe just a positive word for the day, a positive thought for the day. All students have the ability, because this is in the collaboration space, meaning any student can drop things in here, to just whenever they have a good thought, come and share something that one of their classmates can come and reference back to when they're going through something. Just being able to come and read a word of encouragement from your classmates and your peers can really make a difference. There's even inking in class notebook under the draw tab if they have a touchscreen device. My handwriting, it would not be awesomeness, so we're going to skip over that, but know that the feature is there. Another thing that we can do in class notebook when we want to make it more of a private space, and Zia mentioned chat, and that's a way the students and teachers can communicate. But sometimes a student just needs to be able to get things out. And I've set all my students' notebooks up with a voyage section. Instead of calling it social emotional learning, just decided to make it something a little bit more personal for them. And we have 3 pages in their social emotional learning, i.e., voyage section. In 5. This is where students come in, and in 5 lines daily, they just have to give some thoughts about how they're feeling. And I know me as a student, and I see a lot of students day to day that still struggle with this. They'd rather be silent than to express and get help or let someone know that they may be struggling. But in this class notebook space where it's private between just that student and that teacher, they can pour out a little bit more. They feel a little bit more comfortable to share. As a teacher, I can easily go through and look at these. I can add stickers. I can give feedback. I can leave audio recordings. I can interact with my student in this space. So not only is it them journaling, but it's also me being able to interact with them on a different level. About once a week, I give them an assignment, which is a reflection. This one is going to be a guided journal entry that they also do in their notebook, keeping it private and it's non graded. So it's not always so threatening. It doesn't feel like they have to strive for perfection because they're really just sharing themselves. And one of the things that I did start implementing back when I was still in the classroom was just a find your word. It's a list of words that give expressions. Because one thing that I still struggle with as an adult, and I definitely know that our students struggle with, is sometimes I have a feeling, I have an emotion, but I'm not sure what word expresses it. There's a full list of words here that students can search through. And if they're feeling stressed that day, they can just highlight it. As the instructor, I can always go back and see this, but it's also a great way for students to be able to go back and track how they were feeling on certain days. So these are just some of the things that you can do within a class notebook with your students within that team's space.
So that was great, Siobhan. I love learning about how to use Class Notebook because that's a tool that I still am learning as I go, as I work with my students. But back to Teams, there are a couple of different parts of Teams that you can use, a couple of add-ons that'll really help with social and emotional learning in your classroom. You may know that in Teams, you can take polls using Microsoft Forms or even a third-party application like Poly, but you may not know about a new app called Reflect that is part of the 365, part of the Teams offering. To get to Reflect, you'll simply go to that same toolbar that I mentioned before and either find Reflect on your toolbar. It looks like a little circle with a heart around it or a hexagon with a heart around it if you're seeing it up here. And then if you don't see it, you can use the 3 dots to see all the different applications that you have access to and then search for Reflect from that list and then add it to your team. Now, once you add it to your team, this is an example of what a Reflect looks like once it's actually been posted. And you can see here that this is polling students to say how they're feeling today. And they might select one of these different faces to express how they're feeling. And so when we select one of these faces as a student, the teacher gets the data. Imagine walking into your classroom. It's the early morning and you have no idea what's happened to your students between the last time you saw them and now. And you start the morning with one of these check-ins and you're able to see the general sentiment, the general mood of the class. And doing so, that allows you to maybe start your morning differently. If you notice that everybody is on a face that looks like this, that's going to affect how you start class much differently than if everybody is up here or if most of the folks in your class are up here. So really quickly, to create one of these, I'll create a new conversation and I'll click on the Reflect button. That is going to bring up the Reflect app. And I can modify this question, right? It starts with how are you feeling today, but I can use this drop down to actually be a little bit more targeted. Things like overall, how did this week feel for you is a lot different than how are you feeling today. This gives me a different idea. This is a great question to use on, say, a Friday. Once you find a question that works for you, you can decide the privacy. You can decide whether the educator sees the student names and reflections, Or the classmates can also see the reflections as well without names. So that allows students to be honest without revealing who they are. That can be really powerful for other students to see that and say, oh, yeah, someone feels like I do about this particular week or whatever the question or prompt was. You can also select this option here where the educators can see the student names and their reflections, but the classmates don't see anything. And that can be really useful if you just want some data for yourself as an instructor to be able to make decisions about how you're going to tailor instruction that day. And then you can decide how long that poll is going to be open, so the duration of that poll. Whether it's 8 hours all the way up to 1 week, students can continuously come in and start to select these faces so that you can always have up-to-date data about how your class is feeling. And then pressing that send button is going to push that out to the team, and it'll make it look just like this. And students will be able to select that face, and you'll be able to get really important data for their social and emotional learning. There's another application that I love that Siobhan is going to talk about right now that'll really help your SEL in the classroom.
So who remembers the excitement of walking into a classroom and seeing these laying on your teacher's desk? Well, we still have that type of experience, and it's available within Microsoft Teams. And it is through an app called Praise. Praise is built in to your Microsoft Teams already. And some great examples of using it are this awesomely awesome channel. Let's give our students a place that not only we as the teacher can celebrate them, but they can celebrate each other. These are super simple to put in there and allow students to give praise, thanks, and build that type of social and emotional bond that they need to understand that recognition is important, but recognition doesn't always have to come from high down low. It can definitely be on par and go from peer to peer. Let's talk about how we would add a praise into a team. I'm just on my regular post tab, and this can be done in any channel within Microsoft Teams, but just a really good best practice is to create an awesome channel. That way students always know exactly where they can go to add this type of information, and it doesn't clutter up some of our more focused and dedicated learning channels. From this post channel, I'm going to go down and I'm going to look right down towards the bottom, and I'm looking for this ribbon, and this ribbon lets me know that it's going to open up praise. Once I get here, I can choose what type of badge I want someone to achieve. And I am an awesome person, and there's an awesome person that's been helping me out today. So I want to give them the awesome badge. And now we're able to search who this badge is going to go to. And I think Zia has been absolutely awesome in doing the rest of this presentation and helping us all understand a little bit more about social emotional learning. I'm going to go ahead and give this to Zia as the recipient. And if I wanted to, I could add a personalized note. Go ahead and preview to see what it looks like. And when I'm happy with it, just click send. This is just a good way, never to create competition per se in your class, but to create a space where students know that recognition comes. So now that we've talked about praise, let's get into the fun. We want to praise our students for doing great things, but the only way we know that they're doing great things is that we have to see it or hear about it. And there is a tool, there is an application that is available with Microsoft, with Office 365, with Teams as a standalone that allows students to exercise 100% of their full voice. And of course, that is Flipgrid. If you have never used Flipgrid before, trust me, your students can probably show you how to use it. It's something most of them are familiar with. Kind of think of Snapchat, but make it educational and safe, that's focused purely on a school setting, and you have Flipgrid. Flipgrid can be added in a team. Again, Teams is that centralized hub. Everything that we've been showing today, everything that we've been talking about today can live in this one place students have access to across devices. I have a Flipgrid already added as a tab within my team. Label my tab the Flip, because I think I'm a little bit cooler than I am sometime when dealing with students. And the assignment for them was making a difference. And I really wanted to get more than just writing. I wanted to get my students to practice using their voice. In this Flipgrid, they were asked a question. There was a YouTube video for them to watch. And then students were able to come in and answer the question by simply recording a response. I have one student, again, Siobhan, my best student, who did go ahead and record her Flipgrid response already, answering what would she do to make a difference. As the teacher, I'm able to preview these responses in advance and choose if I want them to be available for all students to see, or I can definitely choose to keep these private so that only I can see them. I can check them first, make sure everything is appropriate and on the up and up before I push it out to the rest of the class. Now let's show how easy it is to set something like this up in the class. As the teacher, adding a Flipgrid tab, simply going to your plus sign, and on your plus sign, you'll see all of the apps that are available within Office 365 and Teams that are available to your whole organization, including this list. If you're ever confused or trying to figure out what apps are really here and what some of these apps do, definitely take a moment. In Teams, go down to that far left corner where you'll see apps. It looks like blocks with one block falling slightly off center. And you can search under education apps. You're allowed to filter them out, and when you find an app that's interested you, like Flipgrid, you can simply click on it and it explains how it integrates within the team, what the student will be able to do, and how you can use it as an instructor. So we're going to go back into our classroom. We're going to go in to add a new tab, and we're going to choose to add Flipgrid. When I want to add a Flipgrid tab, I need to add in a join code. If you have an Office 365 account, you already have your educator login to get into Flipgrid. When you choose educator login, it's going to open up in the browser of your choosing. Right now, it's Edge for me. And if I'm struggling a little bit to find a topic for my students, there's a discovery panel within Flipgrid. I'm going to go ahead and search under discovery. And since we're talking about social emotional learning today, I'm going to look up social emotional. This gives me 36,848 topics, or 609 topics now that it's filtered it out based off of the age range and grade level that I've asked for, that other instructors have used. We never want to have to recreate the wheel. There's some awesome examples that we can pull from other educators in our same area that we can look for other educators and that teach our same grade levels, that have the same community, that have the same subject, and we can use some of these for our class. And when we click in, we can see that there's a YouTube video attached. How do you think social emotional skills can improve our lives? This is a great starter topic to get students really thinking about what it is after the video teaches them what they may not know. And we can just say we want to add to topic. I'm going to add this as an individual topic because I want my students to be able to complete it as a class. I can then go in as the instructor and I can make changes. If I want to change the title, if I want to adjust the prompts, if I want to add additional media over the YouTube video that's already there, I can pull in things like Kahoot or Bunsy, Google, Bitmojis, add emojis, add GIFs, add YouTube or Vimeo videos. I can make sure, again, that we want to keep everything safe and secure for our students. So I'm going to lock it down that only students within my organization have access to this. Simply because we are using student videos if they choose to turn them on, and we never want those videos to be accessible to students outside or any outside people. I can choose topic moderation. And as we teach our students about social emotional learning, we also want to be cognizant as educators. Every video that a student makes may not be something that's over appropriate to be shared. Sometimes students like to overshare just because we're still working on boundaries. I'm going to turn on topic moderation because I want to see the video before it's pushed out to the rest of their class. And once I'm happy with it, I'll go ahead and update my topic. Now I have a join code for this assignment that I can simply copy, jump right back over into Microsoft Teams, and paste this join code. Now that this is pasted and I save it, there's going to be a new tab living at the top, and my students would simply come here, make sure that they log in with their Microsoft account. If they have single sign-on, this will never be an issue for them. It's going to take them automatically into their Office 365s, and they will be able to complete this Flipgrid assignment right here. They can record, they can view other recordings, they can respond to their classmates. And again, this works on any device that they're using. Tablets, iPhones, iPads, desktops, laptops, as long as there's internet access, they have access to this. And in that social emotional space, teaching students that they have a voice And encouraging students to use their voice matters more than sometimes we can imagine. So, hopefully, this has been a good experience for you, if not a great experience. You've learned some things about social emotional learning. You've learned some things about how you can reach your students. And as a sidebar, you saw some Microsoft tools thrown in there just for good measure. Just remember that as a teacher, as an educator, we're shaping the minds of the future while they're also shaping us. And we want to make sure that we give them every opportunity to not just learn, not just be emotional, not just be social, but to bring all of those things together because we're preparing that next generation.
That was great, Siobhan, and I absolutely agree. If there's one thing that we learned in the last year during this pandemic, it's that social and emotional learning is so important, whether you're in a physical classroom or a virtual classroom or any other type of learning situation. And we hope that these tools will bring value in your educational journey. We wish you the best.